Hello, welcome everybody to today's talk on usability. Bianca Wiesmayr, my colleague, and I myself, Alois Zoitl, we want to talk today about buttons in plain sight. And why do we think, or why do we talk about that topic is we both maintain medium-sized Eclipse RCP called EclipseCon. It's a classical RCP with all the things that the Eclipse platform provides, like a common navigator framework, different graphical editors using the GAF framework, launching, debugging. And over the years, we noticed sometimes our users are not capable of operating our tool. And we thought, oh, we wrote such a nice tool. Why is that? And very often, we talk with them, and they don't find buttons that are clearly in the middle of the screen and don't know what to do. And maybe you noticed already, we sneaked in a button also on our slide. So if you look up here, there is a button. And Bianca likes that buttons quite a lot because these buttons are very small. You can place them easily in all of your applications all over the place, and they don't use much space. On the other side, they also always have rather common functionality, so I have an idea what's maybe happening when I'm clicking on it, and this is what Bianca likes.
But Alois doesn't like that, although they always do behave rather in the same way, he can't see what's behind them. So if you have a button like this, you can imagine that it might be some menu or so, but you don't see the elements. And behind our button is the program for today. So we will talk about usability framework, which is called Cognitive Dimensions. We haven't invented that, but we have applied it to our Eclipse 4DX. And that's why we will also discuss some common problems that we found. We will talk about usability studies that we have performed based on this framework and that are really lightweight to use for any tool. And we'll summarize some lessons learned that apply not only to our tool, but also to similar visual modeling tools. So the cognitive dimensions, they're actually pretty old. I think they're older than I. And they're published in academic papers. And this is a quote from the one of the original papers where it was applied to visual programming environments. So they were meant to be used by non-HCI experts. So of course, if you have a big tool, a commercial tool, maybe you can hire some UX designers, and maybe they probably do a much better job than we as electrical engineers or software engineers. But for small open source project like ours, we don't have the budget in the beginning. We have a small tool, we have a small community. We need something that we as developers can use in our daily work, not just for shipping the final product to customers years later. And so it allows to discuss some high-level concerns and focuses on discussions between developers. So they are supposed to be discussion tools, more vocabulary than a method. And it's promised to be quick and cheap, so that's what we all need, right? The dimensions, there's 13 of them. I'll go through some of them. They have names such as consistency. So if you think about the button Alois told, I like that they are consistent across platforms. They are unfortunately also, not even they are completely consistent, because we have some more hamburger-style menu, more dots, such as in VS Code, where I stole that button from. Or in Firefox, I noticed they have actually turned the dots by 90 degrees. So small differences in that too. We wanted to learn from the dimension consistency, and we tried to make our tool very consistent. And we made icons, new set of icons, perfectly consistent. I don't know if you see the difference. There are actually 4 different kinds, 4 different kind of blocks. We have a block-based modeling tool. Well, if you see the difference, that's great. Our users didn't. And while the icons were perfectly consistent within each other, the users perceived an inconsistency there because depending on what kind of block they had, they behaved differently because there was different things behind it. So what was meant to improve the consistency actually did the opposite. A second dimension that we have is visibility. So visibility, of course, for graphical languages is especially important, but always what do I see on my screen right now? Also in textual programming, I have some trade-off between size of my text and screen sizes can't be increased infinitely. And for graphical languages, we need a lot more space. So what our language is also doing is introducing some hierarchy. And with the hierarchy, we can introduce layers and hide elements that we don't need right now and provide some structure. But we don't see what's inside. We have come across, we have implemented therefore some expansion mechanisms, some flexible ones in our tool so that you can see application parts within their context. That helps that you don't have to jump through the application, and that's pretty difficult for the users. Other thing with visibility was that we used to have, for each element, a tab until you didn't see anymore the tabs that you opened in the beginning, which is why we went to a breadcrumb style editor. So here you can navigate through the hierarchy. You can see what's going to come behind it. You can kind of peek inside. And such a breadcrumb widget is also available in the Eclipse IDEs. Unfortunately, they are not APIs, so we had to re-implement that for our tool. Another dimension that I would mention is role expressiveness. So for the different kinds of burger menus, you could say that the one with 3 lines has maybe the best role expressiveness, meaning the button explains, it shows its role, so it visually represents what it's going to do. Because to me, this looks like most like a menu. Of course, that could be a matter of taste. So for our blocks, they have names. Names don't have a very good role expressiveness generally because I have to read, that's a lot slower. So what our users often desire are pictures because they can see more quickly what it's going to do. We currently don't support that, but it's a popular request. So finally, I mentioned one dimension which Eclipse IDE is quite good at, which is juxtaposability, and that difficult word is supposed to mean that I can arrange my views flexibly. So in IDEs, we have views. We can put one views to the different screen. What's a bit worse in that direction are dialogues, because when I try to search something, even in my Java code, and I don't quite remember how this word was spelled, and I need to go back, because I can't even scroll, right? So I have to close my dialog, go back. So that's dimension is then more poorly supported in dialogues, which is why we nowadays also try to use views as much as possible. They can be arranged, they can be hidden. Yeah. So one last dimension that I have specifically on the slide here is diffuseness. So it's originally was defined as the verbosity of the language. So if there's very long words. So what that comic is saying is that complex languages or complex tools, let's just use It's just make easy to use a requirement. But that's, unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. So if the language is very complex, a lot of language elements, especially, I guess, in graphical languages, the tools are complex as well. And so, as I mentioned some dimensions on the button here, we said it has maybe not so bad role expressiveness, but visibility is bad. So with one element, always several dimensions are affected. So Alois, what do we do?
It depends. The classical answer when you do usability research, it depends. And we have trade-offs. So all these cognitive dimensions, as Bianca said, influence each other. And depending on what you're doing, some cognitive dimension may be more important for your tool than others. And therefore, what we see, for example, is viscosity and abstraction. Viscosity is how many changes do I need to make to do one change that I want to do. So let's say I would like to rename an element. On how many places do I need to add this, do also this rename. A good tool could do that for you. So therefore, this would help you. On the other side, it may increase the abstraction, which is then a mental burden, and your users have to think more. So this is always when we think we have to come up with trade-offs, where to go, what to do, and how to come along with that. And for example, in our tools, or in tools in general, we found out that for us currently, viscosity is more important, because this makes the user flow more natural. On other tools, if you're developing a viewer with a textual input, like you've seen, if you go upstairs, you will see a demo, I think, from Typefox. They have something where they type and they show the visual language. The viewer has other things that it would like to show, other interaction mechanisms. And the point is, so we cannot give you general answers to all the questions that you may have here. We can also give you only a few guidelines. And in the end, you need to ask the user, because your users will be the people who work with the tool. And there are some myths out there. So I found here this very nice myth that some people think if they have a great design, so we hire the best UX designers in the world, and they will come up with the best graphics, with the nicest UI. Still, your tool may be crap. Sorry. Because in the end, you have to talk with your users. And one thing that's very important, and before we go how we do user studies, is dog fooding is very important. We noticed that we have to use our tool by ourselves. In our case, it's easy because we haven't told you we are researchers on the language that you see here. So for us, the tool is more how to say? Mittel zum Zweck. My English is just going down. It's just supporting us, so the tool is more a side effect. And therefore, we noticed that. But on the other side, what we also noticed is we as developers of the tool use the tool differently. Today in the morning, if you have been in the session of Carsten, you noticed it very nicely. How Carsten presented stuff was more from a user perspective. So you also should watch the dog eating your dog food. And now the important question is, I have here a screenshot from our tool, and a typical task in such tools is to connect pins. In our case, we have here 2 output pins, we have here 2 input pins, we have more output pins. So in that case, we could connect always 1 output pin to an input pin. Guess how, this is an old version of the tool, so the oldest version of the tool I could get run, so 2-3 years old. How do you think you would create, where would you click to make the connection happen?
On the first dot that you want the output.
On the dot, on the red dot? Yeah, exactly. That was 10 years ago the case. Then we noticed this is crap. So at least as own users, we noticed this is not good. So we made the whole area here clickable. And so I have here a video for you. So you can click and drag. And if you see, I did that by myself. And even I, as developer, have problems nowadays. And our users always wanted to hit this small red dot. And this small red dot was at that time 3 by 3 pixels or 4 by 4 pixels. So extremely hard to hit. And I completely forgot we also had an off by 1 error. So there was a very small area between the border of the function of the block and the red pixel where you could not click. And then you moved the block. So our users were furious. So when we watched the users, we noticed, why don't give them feedback? So we introduced something, what you see here. So we see hover feedback. Every time what I completely forgot. You see now the hover. I hope you saw the hover. I think I can go back. So what we did here in that video, and I completely forgot to tell you that. So what we tried to help our users is we changed the mouse cursor. So when you look very detailed, you see the mouse cursor may change. Yeah, here you see the mouse cursor change as you were able to hit it. The problem was our users did not notice the change of the mouse cursor when they hovered the area. So therefore, we then came with something much more intrusive. So this is flickering, so this triggers something in our reptile brain. And now it's much easier to drag and drop this connection. Very simple change, but still rather powerful. Dragging and dropping is also not always easy for many humans, especially when the screen gets big and you have some connection on the top left and something on the bottom left on a screen that is, I don't know, 100 meter by 100 meter in pixels. So what we also came up with is that you select, press Ctrl, and when you, without the mouse clicked, and when you press Ctrl hover, you can create the connection. This is a very special mode. One of our users saw that in another tool, to be honest, so we copied that. But to see, we wanted to give some concrete examples what sometimes could have helped. What we also see here, what we worked on is giving better feedback on selection. So the default GEF3 or GEF Classic editors have very small feedback what is selected. This is also something our users noted. I never know where I can click, what can be selected. To not only give our tool, we found this nice video from EclipseCon and Sprotti. So here you see they also have very nice selection feedback. For many things, they have also hover feedback. So this is things that can help your user. So in a design world, it's called affordances and user feedback, so to make your user interface explorable. But in the end, we need to do usability studies. So I already gave you a sneak preview why we need it and why it came up. Unfortunately, themes, mobile apps will not increase the adoptance of your tool or of your app. You may need to talk with your user. And the problem is we developers, we are not always the best people to talk with users. But when we are talking about open source, most of the time we are the only ones left to do that stuff. And I have good news, it's not that much effort. So if you have a rather narrow user group, so this depends a little bit how many different users you have, but 3 to 5 users, and watching these 3 to 5 users will give you already a great gain here. So this is not from us, this is from Nielsen Group, from Mr. Nielsen, even in that article. They did some research on how much users you need. Even more, it's better to use only 3 and do more consecutive. So because you will notice after the 3 that you have some problems, you have then ideas how to improve the problems. And as Bianca brought up, we have these contradicting things. Even the problems the users will find will be contradicting. So you have to do design decisions, you have to make trade-offs. And you would like to talk with maybe a new set of users, other users, if you improved or not. And therefore, you also should focus on your main tasks. So don't do a user study over all your tool. So we now did 3 user studies, and in each study, we did something else. And this really helped us in focusing on certain points. And this makes also the effort a little bit smaller. So after all these memes, how could such a process look like? So we are researchers, and researchers always look first, has someone else done the work for us? So we started in looking around what usability studies are out there, who did certain things. There is some very nice work on human interface guidelines. For example, Eclipse had a very nice one. The old Apple guidelines were very good. The GNOME, I very much like also the GNOME desktop environment guidelines. They have lots of nice ideas that can help you. But especially if you're developing programming tools, it seems that developers and programmers are no users, but there are nearly no user studies publicly available. So maybe there is an open market for that. So when you come up with, you can look around what others do, what are the tasks of your user. So first of all, you need to find out what would you like to test with your users. Are these new users that are coming to your tool? Are these power users that are using the tool to do very big things? Are these users that would like to do something very small but quick? And very good is always what Bianca put here as this nice bubble here, realistic scenarios. Then it's always a good idea to use this cognitive assessment to assess the tasks and use that to think about how a potential user would use your tool, what are the steps needed, and just reading the description of these cognitive dimensions and thinking about that helped us to reduce a few clicks in our tool. So most of the time it's about reducing the number of clicks, reducing the amount of stuff a user has to remember, things like that. So to make the overall experience nicer. And based on that, you get the first set of stuff that you could improve. Would be a good idea to start with that, and then do a real usability study with real users. So this is then the hard part. This can take some time, so unfortunately it's not for free. And then you can do usability fixes and all over again, all over again. So either then going back to cognitive assessment, do then trade-offs, and here's some nice noise. Where is that coming from? Whatever. And how could such a usability study process in itself look like? So how we did it is, so we started with an introduction video because we had some new users as well that showed around the tool what are the most important areas where the users could click, how the tool is working. We chose a maintenance task. So this was, we have an existing application in our tool, and a user should navigate around and does that. And this task is then conducted in such a way that you need 2 to 3 people. So one person would be the guidance person, or how do you call that?
One person does the instructions, tells about the task. One person is the observer, noting down everything the user does. And one person with think aloud protocol who writes down everything that the user actually says. So the person who is the instructor would constantly remind the user to say aloud what they plan to do. So what did they actually intend to do? And also, we had done it remotely and used videos so that the instructor could ask, "Oh, you're looking a bit startled. Was that now? What did you expect would happen?" To get better feedback.
Or you see that the user is moving around with the mouse, so you can ask, "What are you searching for?" And these are the questions that the instructor is going through and the other person's noting down. We also recorded that. That's sometimes helpful when you forgot something to write down to look at it. After the task, we did a semi-structured interview asking questions around the cognitive dimensions, about certain feelings. Yes, we are developers, but here it's about feelings. So we have to ask, how did you felt? Was something stressful? Things like that. And this is a guided interview where the interviewer is in person, remote, and the observer notes down. And we also did a second questionnaire where the participant could later fill out. And this is interesting because you get different answers. Because in private, people answer differently. And therefore, this is very important to have anonymous. And what we also provided was a solution video to show them how the maintenance task, how we would solve the maintenance task. This is a little bit like a bonus. So sometimes you also have to find ways how you give some reimbursements to the users. It could be some cake or whatever is suitable for your users. A beer. So before coming to the lessons learned, a very important lesson that I had to learn, and I found this very interesting, is users are interesting. So if you watch what the user is doing, for example, driving a car, and then hear what the user is saying, I would like to ride a motorcycle. And in the end, what the user really needs would be a bicycle. And therefore, it's very important. User feedback is important, but you need to filter and interpret it. I think the most famous quote that fits here is Henry Ford's quote. If I would have asked my customer what they need, they would say a faster horse or a more powerful horse. So it's always an interpretation. And therefore, also the cognitive dimensions that we mentioned can help you. Nonetheless, I got lots of inspiration from our users. This is something that I found very interesting in this endeavor that we did. And I hand over to Bianca for the final lessons learned and the presenter.
Yeah. One thing that we figured out in the cognitive dimensions, we said, cognitive assessment, we said, when I have to rearrange blocks and I have to then rearrange the connections manually, that's a classical example of viscosity. So we integrated ELK, Eclipse Layouting Kernel, automated layout. We were super proud of that feature. It looked really cool. Unfortunately, there is a slight catch. So this is an add block, and it's quite intuitive to put the 3 elements that I need to add in a column. But we don't have only data connections in our case. There was some additional event connections for the execution flow. So you can now optimize either for the red or for the blue connections. Unfortunately, ELK doesn't know if what you currently want to do. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. So when they triggered layout on this example, they would see that the layout that optimizes for the execution flow from left to right, the blocks are executed one after another. Most of them make sense, but unfortunately not always. So we learned that we need to provide customization mechanisms for that, or give some better possibilities for the tool to interpret what the user would actually want there, which might be a bit difficult. So another thing is that we tried to make our tool less complicated, less views. We made there this System Explorer, which is a custom feature, uses Eclipse Common Navigator framework, but we customized it heavily. You can do a lot of things there. You can use it like a palette, so you can take the types and drag them for inserting into the graphical editor. You can also see. Just look at all the elements that you have. You see the hierarchy in the application. So these are not on the up. It's actually just all one file. On the bottom, there is like individual files, one entry per file. So you might see that could confuse users, and it heavily did. So they had no idea that from here you could not drag and drop from left to the right. From here you could. We as developers, we knew it was all clear to us, but for a novice user, the difference is just not there. So actually, it would have been better to separate some elements. Also, we are trying to offer perspectives or customization so that different engineering roles who have different needs don't have all the features at once, which then makes the tool a bit less complex. In our case, that makes sense because there are different engineering roles in the final users often. Search features are great. Already in textual languages, but even more so in graphical ones, even more so when you offer an auto-layouting, as we learned, because the user auto-layouts, we are all proud, and then he asks, oh, where did that block go? Searching for text in a 2D diagram, especially when it gets larger, is not so much fun. We did identify it by ourselves, but we were then still surprised by the number or the variety of search features that our users requested. So in our case, there is a couple of things to search for. So they basically wanted to search for every text that they could, and in all ways possible. So one search feature or one search dialog that could be customized is not enough for our users. And in our case, it sometimes makes sense to change the kind of the block. So then some pins are gone. In the editing process, I delete a pin. What we used to do is we just found all connections that got invalid, and we just threw them away because they're invalid now, right? And then our user was like, oh, but there was a connection. I don't remember what this connection was about. I'm not sure I still need it. And then they got nervous because we had done changes that they couldn't understand. So we nowadays, we don't delete everything automatically, but we show it as an error, something that you need to fix, but don't need to fix immediately. That also allows to load broken files because users, although they're not supposed to, sometimes edit in the XML file directly. We offer a really great tool.
Or Git messes with the XML file.
And then the XML is broken. Nothing is starting. My big project is broken. I can't do anything. Well, since we have these error markers, you see then that there is just one block that lost its identifier. And yeah, okay, you can fix it in the graphical XML. You see the rest. You know where the error happened. And finally, we think that usability studies are worth the effort, especially multi-stage usability studies, because in the cognitive assessment, we found errors that were easy to fix. We found errors that were obvious. We did usability study. We saw that users not always sometimes gave completely opposite answers in the questionnaire than what we thought we saw in the observations. So those are things that we need to identify and analyze. So I hope that you got some idea of the cognitive dimensions framework. We really think they are good discussion tools, because previously we were just talking on the level of, but I think that this is really difficult when I do it like that. And I said, oh, but I don't see it if it's like that. And now we can talk about, we have a vocabulary to talk about. We are aware of the priorities that we have. So that would be lesson number 2, know your priorities. And finally, ask your users when you have difficult trade-offs. If there are any questions, then like we're, yeah.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, in my experience, before asking feedback to the user, do you allow, let's say, a warming up? Because in my experience, when you introduce a feature, especially if it's not like expected as background, because maybe you use a similar tool, at the beginning it's complaining, but if you wait enough time, it's get used, and they don't want what you change. Because maybe asking feedback too early is...
We tried to do both. We actually didn't have just 3 or 5 users. We had in the first round, we had 10, and in the second round, we had 7. That helped us to tailor it to user groups, like, okay, those are the novice users. They have never seen the tool, maybe. Some of them did really well. Some of them did really poorly. Those are the experienced users. So they came with different backgrounds, and that gave some different results. I would say it depends. If you know you have one main target user and they're going to use the tool anyway, then it's enough to say, okay, we wait it out. But we also think we are still a young open source project in the sense that from development time. So we still want people to just download our tool and test it and find new ways of using them. And then very likely the next user will also have the same problem. And if we are unlucky, it's not enough to wait it out, but they'll actually quit.
And if I may add here, we had one user who did not use the tool at all. So he was a younger user, to be honest. And he had experience with similar tools in that area, and he approached the tool completely different. So he explored, he just clicked around, he tried out stuff, and he gave very open feedback, but nonetheless he was the user who completed the task fastest. And he did not even watch the video up front because he didn't have time, and he was too lazy. So therefore, we are all humans, each human is different, so there is no one-size-fits-all answer, but I can only recommend watch the users.
There was a second question.
The second question is, you use the Eclipse, let's say, standard, and there is a customization, and anyway, you are some constrained by the Eclipse framework, let's say. You have some UI workspaces and stuff. Now it's a provocative, you can with the new one web technology, that basically with the concept of Visual Studio Code, you think that is more usable or less usable in terms of customizing the freedom to create a UI that is usable? Because my concern, maybe because I use it too much to the old one.
So the
I am referring to Teia.
Yeah. The question for the recording was about the new frameworks, whether they're easier to adapt for our needs. And we have only done little experiments with Teia, so it's a bit hard to give a final answer. But from what we saw, we had some troubles with the available features for now, so not everything that we felt we needed was there. So for now, we feel more comfortable with the Eclipse platform, although it comes with its own usability problems. So some things that appear in our studies, we knew, okay, that we would need to fix in the platform.
Yeah, so would you view usability testing as a different activity than accessibility testing? Or do you want to combine them together? For example, I'm red-green colorblind, so sometimes I get asked to test software. Do you feel like that's too complicated to do both at the same time, or do you keep those separate?
So to repeat the question again, whether accessibility testing such as color blindness can or should be combined with usability testing, and to be honest, we haven't done much accessibility testing, but I would almost suggest like separating it to some degree, so that I have to kind of see if the person has a problem because he or she has difficulties with glasses, sees poorly, and this person is just a different user type who doesn't have experience with Eclipse tools. So I think that I would try to acquire some experience with users in general before going into specific accessibility problems, but we all have some kind of issues, right? So none of us has perfect vision or perfect hearing or whatever. So we will. It's going to be a bit intertwined anyway. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, color. We know color is a problem. I think we should have talked about that. Sorry that we forgot that. But other things are also a problem. Already talked about drag and drop is not easy for many people. And one thing that typically when you are more experienced in user studies and user experience design is that you would upfront come up with personas. So personas is an approach where you assign user groups to certain representative. So you say, this is Bob. Bob has that and that kind of background. For example, I hope you are not Bob. Has problems with colors, and this is what Bob would like to do. This is a way, and then you do certain personas. You can use that also for the cognitive assessment. So saying, okay, this is always a good idea to try to think as your user. It's very hard. I didn't think about to put it here in the talk because we already removed so many slides and ideas we had. But this is how I would approach that. And then you can think what kind of accessibility needs your users may have. And I would then definitely, if you know that you have users with certain needs, then you should definitely consider that early, because later adding is very hard. And I must confess we are not very good in that as well, but working and trying to improve is what we try to do here.
What our users typically have is vision problems, because we're all engineers, we sit in front of the computer all the time, I myself have that. And we have seen, especially in older users, that holding the mouse steady or something like that, so it's an age issue as well. Yeah, any further questions? of course, you can also ask us directly then.
Our farewell slide.
We also have some publications. If you're interested on the process, you would find something there. We have some more on the way, so that you can better do that.